For centuries, Rome ruled the known world. Then, it fell. To most, the Roman Empire was finished. But one emperor refused to believe that. He dreamed of restoring a lost empire, and one forgotten general would make the impossible seem possible. His name was Belisarius. In 476 AD, the Western Roman Empire collapsed. The last Western emperor was deposed, and lands that had once belonged to Rome were divided among barbarian kingdoms. To many, the Roman Empire was gone forever. But in the East, the empire endured. Its capital, Constantinople, remained one of the richest and best defended cities in the world. There, Roman law, administration, and military traditions survived. In 527, a new emperor took the throne. His name was Justinian. He was not content merely to defend what remained. He dreamed of restoring the Roman Empire. North Africa, Italy, even Rome itself. It was an ambition few believed possible. Decades had passed since the western provinces were lost, and powerful kingdoms had replaced Roman rule. Rebuilding the empire would demand enormous resources, careful planning, and years of war. Yet Justinian believed it could be done. He only needed one thing: a general. Justinian found that general in a young officer named Belisarius. Little is known about his early life. He was probably born around the year 500 in Thrace, a frontier province of the Eastern Roman Empire. Unlike many famous commanders, Belisarius did not come from an ancient noble family. He rose through the ranks on merit, earning a reputation for discipline, intelligence, and calm leadership. As his abilities became clear, Justinian entrusted him with increasingly important commands. Around this time, Belisarius married Antonina, a well-connected and remarkably capable woman. More than simply his wife, she would become his trusted companion on campaign, and, through her connections at court, an influential ally throughout his career. Before long, Belisarius would have the chance to prove that Justinian's confidence had not been misplaced. Beyond the empire's eastern frontier, Rome's oldest enemy was preparing for war. In 530 AD, a large Persian army advanced toward the fortified city of Dara, an important Roman stronghold in northern Mesopotamia. Belisarius was given the task of stopping them. It was an enormous responsibility. Although his army was disciplined, the Persians likely outnumbered the Romans and were renowned for their experienced cavalry and skilled archers. Rather than meeting the Persians in an open battle, Belisarius reshaped the battlefield to his advantage. He ordered a carefully planned system of trenches to be dug across the plain. Instead of forming a single defensive line, the trenches were staggered, creating a funnel that would channel the Persian cavalry into narrow approaches, while exposing them to attacks from both sides. His infantry held the center behind these defenses. Cavalry was concealed on the flanks, ready to strike at the trapped enemy, while a reserve force stood prepared to reinforce any point under pressure. Everything had been arranged before the first arrow was fired. When the Persian attack began, exactly as Belisarius had anticipated, their advance was disrupted by the trenches. Unable to maintain their formation, they were forced into the narrow openings left by the Romans. There, Belisarius struck. As the Persian center became locked in combat, Roman cavalry launched coordinated attacks against their flanks. The battle gradually turned in Rome's favor. By the end of the day, the Persians had been driven from the field. It was one of Rome's greatest victories over Persia in generations. But the victory at Dara was important for another reason. It revealed a new kind of commander. Belisarius had not won through overwhelming numbers or reckless courage. He had won through preparation, discipline, and an ability to read the battlefield before the fighting had even begun. For Justinian, it was confirmation that he had chosen the right man. For Rome's enemies, it was the first warning. Belisarius was unlike any general they had faced before. Belisarius's victory at Dara secured the empire's eastern frontier, but the greatest threat to Justinian's reign was about to emerge much closer to home. In January 532, Constantinople erupted into violence. What began as unrest between rival chariot racing factions, the Blues and the Greens, quickly grew into a full-scale uprising against the emperor. For days, the capital descended into chaos. Government buildings were burned. Prisons were opened. Much of the city was engulfed in flames. The rioters proclaimed a new emperor, and Justinian's throne seemed ready to fall. Some of his closest advisors urged him to flee the city while escape was still possible. Justinian stayed, but courage alone would not save the empire. Before resorting to force, Justinian attempted to break the rebellion from within. He sent the trusted eunuch Narses into the hippodrome carrying a large sum of gold. There, Narses secretly approached the leaders of the Blue faction, reminding them of their traditional loyalty to the emperor and exploiting their long-standing rivalry with the Greens. One by one, the Blues abandoned the uprising and quietly left the arena. The rebellion had been split. Only then did Justinian give the order. Together with the general, Mundus, and a small force of loyal soldiers, Belisarius entered the hippodrome. The fighting was brief, but devastating. Trapped inside the enormous arena, the remaining rebels had little chance of escape. By the end of the day, the uprising had been crushed. Ancient sources claim that around 30,000 people were killed, although the true number remains uncertain. The Nika Riots marked one of the bloodiest episodes in Constantinople's history. Yet they also secured Justinian's rule. The empire had survived, not through military force alone, but through a combination of political strategy and decisive action. Soon, Justinian would entrust Belisarius with an even greater task. Justinian's dream was nothing less than the restoration of the Roman Empire. To many, it was impossible. Nearly 60 years had passed since the fall of the Western Empire. Its former provinces had become powerful kingdoms, each with its own rulers, armies, and ambitions. If the empire was to be rebuilt, those kingdoms would have to be defeated, one by one. Justinian chose to begin with North Africa. Nearly a century earlier, the rich Roman province had been conquered by the Vandals, who established a powerful kingdom with its capital at Carthage. In the summer of 533, Belisarius was given command of an ambitious expedition. Around 500 ships carried thousands of soldiers, cavalry, sailors, and supplies across the Mediterranean. After landing on the North African coast, Belisarius advanced cautiously toward Carthage. The Vandal king, Gelimer, prepared to destroy the Roman army before it could reach the city. His forces would attack from several directions at once, trapping Belisarius between converging armies near a place called Ad Decimum, the 10th milestone. On paper, it was an excellent strategy, but it depended on perfect timing. As the battle began, the Vandal attacks became separated. Some units arrived too early, others too late. Instead of facing one overwhelming assault, Belisarius found himself confronting isolated enemy forces. Recognizing the opportunity immediately, he acted before the Vandals could recover. Roman cavalry charged the advancing Vandal detachments, driving them back one after another. When Gelimer reached the battlefield, he paused after discovering the body of his brother, Amatas, who had been killed in the fighting. The delay proved decisive. It gave Belisarius the time he needed to regroup his forces and launch a final counterattack. The Vandal army broke. What had begun as a carefully planned ambush ended in a disastrous defeat. The road to Carthage now lay open. Only days later, Belisarius entered the city. He ordered his soldiers not to loot or harm its inhabitants, presenting himself not as a conqueror, but as the representative of a government reclaiming one of its own lost provinces. Within months, the Vandal Kingdom had ceased to exist. For the first time in generations, a major western province had returned to Roman rule. Justinian's impossible dream no longer seemed impossible. Belisarius had shown that the empire could do more than survive. It could conquer again. With North Africa restored to Roman rule, Justinian turned toward an even greater prize: Italy. It was the heart of the old Western Roman Empire. Rome itself still stood there, not as the capital of an empire, but as a city ruled by the Ostrogoths. If Justinian truly wished to restore the Roman Empire, Italy had to be reclaimed. Once again, the task fell to Belisarius. In 535, his army crossed into Sicily, securing the island with remarkable speed, before advancing onto the Italian mainland. The first major obstacle was Naples. The city refused to surrender. Its walls were strong, and weeks of siege brought little progress. Then Belisarius discovered an abandoned aqueduct leading into the city. Under the cover of darkness, a small group of soldiers climbed through the narrow passage, entered Naples, and opened the gates from within. The city fell. The road to Rome was open. In December 536, Belisarius marched toward Rome. The Gothic garrison, unwilling to risk a battle outside the city's walls, withdrew before his arrival. Belisarius entered the Eternal City almost unopposed. For the first time in 60 years, Rome was once again under Roman rule. Justinian's dream was becoming reality. But the victory was only the beginning. The Ostrogoths soon returned with a massive army under their new king, Vitiges. They surrounded Rome, determined to starve the defenders into submission. For more than a year, Belisarius defended the city against overwhelming odds. Outnumbered and constantly under attack, he strengthened Rome's defenses, repaired damaged walls, organized the city's supplies, and launched bold cavalry raids that kept the Gothic army off balance. His calm leadership inspired the defenders through months of hunger, exhaustion, and repeated assaults. Time after time, the Goths failed to break the city's defenses. When they finally withdrew, Belisarius had preserved not only Rome, but Justinian's entire campaign in Italy. After lifting the siege, Belisarius carried the war northward. His army captured one Gothic stronghold after another, steadily reducing Ostrogothic resistance across Italy. Eventually, only Ravenna, the Gothic capital, remained. Its formidable defenses made a direct assault both costly and uncertain. Then the Gothic nobles made an extraordinary proposal. If Belisarius would abandon Justinian, they would proclaim him Emperor of the West. Rather than rejecting the offer immediately, Belisarius appeared to accept it. Believing they had secured his allegiance, the Goths opened the gates of Ravenna and surrendered the city without a final battle. It was a brilliant deception. Once inside, Belisarius revealed his true intentions. Ravenna was taken in Justinian's name. Belisarius had no intention of ruling an independent Western empire. Without the resources, fleet, and support of Constantinople, such a kingdom would have been impossible to sustain. Instead, he delivered the Gothic capital and Justinian's greatest victory, without the bloodshed of a prolonged siege. By 540, much of Italy had returned to Roman control. Justinian's dream had come closer to reality than anyone had thought possible. Again and again, Belisarius accomplished what others believed could not be done. He never claimed a throne for himself. He never sought to become emperor. He remained loyal to the empire he had sworn to serve. Yet today, the name of Belisarius is known to far fewer people than those of Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, or Napoleon. Perhaps that should change. Because for an extraordinary moment in history, one man made the Roman Empire rise again.